Morning all. Some very exciting chess is being played in the Chess Olympiad in Tromso, Norway at the moment. In rounds 1 and 2 there were some very interesting sacrifices and backfires, and part of that was major upsets where a much higher rated player sometimes lost to a lower rated player. So let me show you a selection of 16 of these. So this first example, Boris Gelfand against Amonatov. Gelfand 2753 is higher rated than his opponent 2590, and his opponent played h5 here, and we'll put on a Kibitzer. It looks like an interesting King's Engine defense position where black would like to kind of open up that h5. If white plays something like h3, then maybe that's useful for black later, the h file. But white played a shocking move here. I wonder if you can guess what Boris Gelfand played if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, knight f5. It's actually to do with this g file, and look what happens. Black takes that, can't be tolerated. G takes. We've just got that g file for a knight. Apparently this sacrifice has been played before. It might not be totally original, but still it's quite spectacular. White is now calmly going to play rook g1 given time, so black tries to react quickly with d5. Boris now takes on d5 and now plays rook g1. This might not actually even be the most accurate way of playing. Maybe e5 is mentioned by the engine actually here, but rook g1, I don't know, it's very, very difficult for black to play this though. His king now has got severe issues. Plays king h8, and in fact the game carries on brilliantly with rook takes g7, sacking the exchange. King takes, check, and now bishop g5, and actually this enormous pin is a problem for black, for knight d5. Bishop takes f5 was played, counter sacrificing. It doesn't help though, that's just ignored. If e takes f, then knight d7, and maybe black's almost okay, but no, it's ignored. Knight takes d5. The dark square pressure is fierce here. Knight bd7, rook d1. So very complicated position, but white is doing very well here. Rook g8. Now knight takes f6, getting the piece back because of that pin. Black tries here though. Rook takes g5, queen takes g5, and queen takes f6. Now we have queen takes h5 check, king g7, e takes f5. So white has got his material back and a lot more. He's also now 2 pawns up with a fierce attack still. Check, check, queen c3 threatening queen h8, f6 shielding that, but rook g1 now, rook c8, queen d2, and here black resigned. So I thought that was quite an interesting sacrificial move. This knight f5 is an interesting idea to bear in mind against the King's Engine. White doesn't also want to play g5 because I think black might be just about okay with knight h7, keeping things closed. But knight f5, a bit of a shock there. Now here is an example, a very unexpected example. Let's see. Frode 2500 playing Ivanchuk. Frode Urkedal playing Vassily Ivanchuk, the Ukrainian team, one of the favourites, one of the top seeded teams. Here, Frode Urkedal 2500, so Ivanchuk's 2744. Frode plays rook a3, so white's intention, given time, is maybe to get out of this pin with a queen move next, this pin on c3, but is inviting rook takes b4. Surely that's tempting to win the queen, or is it? Because it will be 2 rooks. Well, in this position, in fact, my engine suggests rook takes b4 is a plausible move, and it's what Vassily plays. Queen a1 might be on the cards, for example, attacking a7 if rook takes b4 is not played. Just as an example, So say knight c6, queen a1. This looks actually quite okay for white, quite decent. There's not too much of a king safety issue. So basically, Vassily did play rook takes b4, but look what happens. C takes b4, rook takes, so 2 rooks for the queen, and the queen comes out to hit b4. That seems quite bleak when losing that b4 pawn, but white plays a simple and powerful move. As they say, simple chess, sometimes very simple and effective chess here. What does white want to do? Well, there happens to be a very important problem in this position, a problem piece for black. Can you guess what white plays in this position if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, white simply plays rook ac3. He just wants to get onto the pin the knight. Pin and win, as they say. It's a major thing to pin. Sometimes, you know, it doesn't matter about pawns like this. Now, Vassily played knight f7. If he does take the pawn, then actually this is pinned, but it can be unpinned with knight f1, still leaving this problem knight. But let's have a look at the game continuation. Actually, knight f7 was played, check, king g7, and now rook 1 to c7. Queen takes b4, and now knight f1. And it's actually apparent here that the king is actually rock solid. Black is far away from doing anything with the queen and the light squares here, very far away. But in the meantime, white is just going to munch that knight with, say, rook d7 and rook c7. So black actually resigned here. Vassily Ivanchuk resigned here. He felt it was hopeless. Let's say queen a4, trying to stop queen d7. Then rook d8, using the pin and a double. And say king f6, then here, just munches the knight. There's no way of extracting the knight here. If king g6, then check. And then we're like taking the knight. Once the knight drops, it's material advantage to white, and it's going to be a mop-up job. The queen by herself is not such a great piece here. This will just be a mop-up job with 2 rooks on the 7th. So yeah, a bit of a shocking defeat. So that was an upset of the round in round 2. But it seems tempting in a way. You know, Engine was mentioning rook takes b4 here, and now having seen this, it's changing its tune to rook b7. But still, it's a nice position for white. Okay, let's have a look at another example, sacrifice or backfire. The Grave on the French team at 2768. That's here, the Grave, Maxim, VLM, is playing white against a 2513 Segmed Bachelon, and black seems to have a promising position. Black plays bishop b4 and seems to be threatening knight takes b3 using that pin. White now plays quite a surprising move, but I think it's one of the maybe not that surprising. It's a great idea. It's a fantastic conception, and it's again actually looking. You'll get some clues from the previous example. If you think the previous example, the power of 2 rooks on the 7th, this is actually a little bit related in that theme. White here, Mathieu Legrand, plays. Well, I wonder if you can guess it. What would you play here with white? If I give you 10 seconds to think about this. So I've given you a clue about the 7th rank. So white to play. Okay, rook b7. So he doesn't mind the knight takes b3. He's got these 2 pieces attacked. The rook moves. Now the rook hasn't got too many squares which seem useful. This one's cut off by the bishop. This one by the knight. So it seems like rook d1 is plausible, and that is a good move. But also rook f1 is plausible, and that is played. Rook e1 is covered by the bishop. So either d1 or f1. f1 is chosen actually. The engine suggests actually might even be stronger than d1. On d1, then bishop c2. So rook f1 might be the very strongest location for this rook. All white wants to do is say to black, look, you've got these 2 pawns on a skewer. What are you going to do about that? Knight d2 is now played, hitting the rook. And it seems, you know, it would be very nice for black if rook takes b4 it should be okay. Knight takes, and then black should be okay here. But no, white in this position plays rook c1. So the intention to get both rooks joined together. It's like having connected passed pawns in a way that, you know, the dynamic potential is echoed in certain configurations. 2 rooks on the 7th will start mowing down these pawns. A rook by itself, nothing much, but 2 rooks on the 7th, big deal. And black is in severe trouble now. He tries rook a4, and we get both rooks on the 7th, bishop g6. The king location is also very significant here. h4 now threatens a mate in 1 with bishop e5. So it's not threatening a mate in 1. It's threatening a mate in 2. Pardon me, with bishop e5 and then g4 check. Hence, black's next move is to stop at the g4 part with h5. Now e4 is played, threatening a mate in 1 again, a mate in 1 rather, because the f5 square is covered. So black desperately plays knight takes e4. The problem is, if he uses his pawn to take, then this 5th row is weakened, and we have a mate in 4 with check, a check here, and then mating like that. So basically the knight sack is played, knight takes. We have f takes, so white is doing fantastically well. D takes. Now g4 is played. Very, very powerful stuff, g4. Covering the f5, threatening bishop e5. And now it's really bad for black. If hg, bishop g5 check, rook d5 is again winning material, mate in 2. You might think, well, what was the point of g4? Well, it's to stop the king actually using the g4 square, coming out to use g4. If we had played like this first, check, then the king's got the g4 square here. But by playing g4, it's taken away. So fantastic stuff, you know, conceptually, tactically, from Vassily the Grave. So g4 is absolutely crushing here. And I think black resigned after g4 in this position. Okay, let's have a look at another interesting sacrifice or backfire in the Olympiad. Vladimir Kramnik, 2760, one of the top rated players, of course, in the tournament, playing against our Modiaki Mohammed, and black is almost paralysed, in Kramnik's own words. Black is had a bad opening basically, and it's a desperate position anyway. Technically, maybe the Indians just knight f5, f8, but I don't really think this is still better for black. Black tries to sacrifice a pawn by playing bishop f8 to try and untangle and simplify. So this represents, or how it's played, a pawn sacrifice. Because now, after bishop takes f8, black really didn't fancy knight takes, well, queen takes f8 seems to hold material, but knight d5 here is a real pain with the c7 pawn. Black didn't fancy this at all. Say this position, it's just massively better for white. So black tries the sacrifice, and it's in a difficult position. Black tries knight takes f8, sacrificing on e5. It's an interesting try, but okay, the pawn is taken. We have queen d4, but the knight just retreats. Queen c5 creating this pin. It seems tempting, and we've got a pin here, and we've got a potential threat of knight g4. So how does Vladimir cope with this? He unpins the knight here with queen b2, and actually after knight g4, one defensive move, key and simple and strong, stronger than rook f1, which would give black some counterplay. I think bishop, well, not much, but bishop e6, but even stronger, just knight d1, h3 to kick the knight, knight d7. This preserves rook c1 to torture the backward pawn. That's the point. So rook c1, now knight d2, and the queen's going to be evicted from that diagonal. Knight c5, knight c4, evicting the queen. Queen goes to f6. This is not helping matters. This accelerates black's demise from what was already a very uncomfortable position. It actually loses a piece. It really does backfire this queen f6 here. If white had played queen takes f6, knight takes, then this is better, much better than the game. But what Vladimir plays, can you guess? It's really, really strong. If I give you 10 seconds here, Vladimir Kramnik to play, crushing advantage, simple move. Okay, just knocking out the defender. Bishop takes g4. It forces black, well, to resign here, because queen takes, knight takes, actually hitting the knight, and also defending this one. After bishop takes g4, white can just simply play rook takes c5 because the knight's protected. Also f3 is strong, but rook takes c5 is possible. So that was actually from a difficult position, so it's hardly a backfire. It's kind of still a logical conclusion from the opening. But okay, this next interesting example, Peter Svidler playing white, 2-7-5-1. Peter Svidler, one of the strongest players in the tournament, against a much lower rated Bilal Samuri. Svidler played rook e1. Black trying to play a dynamic move, h6. I say that because if bishop takes f6, then this would be great news, relatively great news anyway, with this pressure on d4, and so black might be looking forward to a game there. But actually, in this position, there is an interesting resource for white available. Can you guess what Peter Svidler played here, which establishes a big advantage actually? So white to play. If I give you 10 seconds here, what would you play as white? Okay, the threat is ignored. Alice Spassky sacrifices recently. Knight takes d5. White's fundamentally got a lot of pressure on c6 and e7. So if h takes g, just knight takes c6, hitting the queen, and that e7 is a big problem. So that would be a massive advantage for white. So this is horrible, this knight takes d5 to deal with. It can't be dealt with very easily at all. Black tries knight takes d5, and then we have knight takes c6, b takes, and white's just got a huge advantage here. Bishop takes, knight takes, queens come off, rook takes e7. Great simplification to basically a winning position. It's not opposite coloured bishops. There's a rook on the 7th, huge pressure on the diagonal, horrible pawns, and the game continued a little bit longer though, like this. Oh, actually it went a distance after, but you can see that the c6 pawn is now being tortured, and white just with this isn't helping black too much, because that a pawn, there's a very dangerous a pawn here which is running away with things. Check, and black resign here, but I think the key moment here, just ignoring that that threat, just knight takes d5 was a bit of a blow. So another interesting game. This is a very, very violent tactical game. Fire on board from Shirov, so it came out of a kind of fried liver stuff. Black played knight cb4 here, and d4 has been played before. This is interesting. Shirov continues like Alamorphy. He plays. Can you guess what he played in this position? It looks as though c2 is attacked, and it's useful to defend d5. So what would you play here with white? Shirov's opponent was Sarunas Solskis, a 2-5-4-4, so quite a dangerous opponent. Shirov is 2-7-0-9, again one of the top seeds of the tournament. So white to plays a very interesting move. Okay, a3, so offering like an entire rook sack here. Knight takes king d1, knight takes a1, and initially, you know, Stockfish reckons this is about equal. It's a certain depth 17. Knight takes d5, but it's incredibly dangerous for black. These remaining attacking bits, you know, can all be getting to black's king soon. Apparently there might be something in queen h4 here. This might be quite interesting for black though. Queen h4. I'm not sure. It needs a lot of analysis. Black played king d6, and we have d4, bishop e6, rook e1, and now this is really dangerous for black. If c6, white can just ignore that threat to knight and play rook takes, because this attack is too strong. Set the exchange there, and we've got carnage. Yeah, black would have to give up the queen. So basically, b5 was played. Slight weakness of the last move though. Shirov reacts with knight b4. Looking at the c6, we have b takes, and we have a bit of a king hunt now. Winning the queen now, bishop g5. And white is better after having won that queen, as you might expect here, but still the game continued a little bit like this. Knight d3. The knight's kind of stranded, but it's unstranded itself for a moment, it seemed, giving itself the b3 square. d6 check, rook e6, and here after g6 there's a crushing final blow though in this position. Rook takes g6 is played, and black resigned here. White's gonna just play queen e4 if it's ignored, and if it's not ignored, then queen e6 check. This is just horrible for black, taking the rook here. So very, very violent game from Shirov there. I think that was round 2. So just a3 here. But yeah, I think this needs some analysis. This position we had, where after knight takes d5, this queen h4 is interesting. It seems it's a basic computer who doesn't care about his king, and double checks. Double check here like this. I don't know how clear this is, so needs some analysis. But a very interesting game. Maybe someone will try that again with black against Shirov later in the tournament. Now this next example, Alexander Moisenko at 2707 against Arian Tari at 2440. So black played h6, and can you guess what white played? Now usually we kind of think knight and bishop are not very good to give up for rook, but in this position there are some slight finesses of the position, like this pawn on c5. So actually white gives it a punt. Knight takes f5. There's also this pawn on f4 ready for f5 in certain cases, so it makes this a little bit more plausible to give up the two pieces here. But white is in no rush to play bishop takes f7. That would be favouring black actually. White puts on the pressure with knight e5, so black dare not liberate any more white's pieces here. Tries to shield the diagonal. Now knight takes f7 brings the king out much more advantageously than if the bishop had been given up. We've still got the dangerous bishop, and the key point is this very dangerous pin on the pawn is a major difference. You know, if we had done knight takes f7 and bishop takes here, then we lose that pin. A lot of these tactics are hinging on pins. Black would actually be quite okay here, it seems. So, but the way this is played with knight e5 and knight takes, we've got that horrendous pin on e6, and white now plays queen c2, looking at g6, so the king can't dare step back. You know, king g8, we just take on. We've got the option of taking on g6 at some point. Actually, not immediately. Rook bd1. Well, there's just pressure on g6, so not immediately. Queen takes g6, but after rook d1, it's uncomfortable. So black here played queen c7, and now we have f5 celebrating that pin. So g takes, rook takes, and there's all sorts of unpleasant things going on here now, like pressure on f6 or rook f6. You know, so king e7. Now in this position, the king's trying to get away from the scene and unpinning. The rook's now kind of attacked. It just moves back one, and it makes way actually for white threatening queen g6 here. So black tries to parry that queen g6 because that would be very unpleasant with knight e5. And now white continues with bishop c3, and it's introducing other ideas like rook takes, then check here to try with the queen. It's a very, very difficult position for black. Black plays bishop d7, and indeed even here now, this bishop here on this diagonal is so dangerous. White plays rook takes f6. After bishop takes f6, check, king d8, check, king e7, and now white just takes the rook. White is doing very, very well here. He's threatening actually rook takes b7 to win the queen, not almost win the queen, no, not win the queen, to harass the queen. So bishop c8, bishop e2 is played. All sorts of threats, just taking here, or bishop a5 even to deflect the queen. King f7, queen takes a7, and here black resigned. So quite a brutal game. You know, white's the exchange up here, so it's understandable that black resigned here. Quite a brutal game indeed, starting from this knight takes f7. In this next example, Gatakamsky for the USA team playing white, Gatakamsky 2706 against Emerson Elijah, a 23-34. Black had just played knight h5 here, and this kind of backfires a little bit here. Can you see what white played? What do you reckon white played here? It seems almost like a quiet position, as though nothing much is going on, but after bishop takes b8, there's actually a serious problem with black's position. In rook takes b8, for example, if this was played, then knight e5, hitting the bishop, a powerful forcing move, because if bishop f5, then g4, and black is in severe trouble. Say f6, then white is doing very, very well here. In fact, the strongest move technically, queen d1, leaving black a terrible pawn structure like this. Even if it's not winning a piece, it's just diabolical. This is absolutely diabolical. So this is the kind of thing that's now implied by bishop takes b8. So it's kind of a backfire on knight h5. But black tries bishop takes f3 here, and maybe, you know, technically it seems g takes is quite good. Bishop takes a7 was played. Black takes the queens off. A takes, protecting the bishop. So white seems to have, for the moment, just what has actually happened here. Because actually, on material, it seems equal on material actually, and the engine suggests only white's only slightly better at this stage. So I'm not entirely sure the follow through was totally accurate with bishop takes a7 in this position. G takes might be interesting. For example, if takes here, then takes, and we've got that pressure on a7. So this is also an interesting continuation, which might be, you know, the engine suggests this is quite good for white here, and it looks good, you know, with the pressure. But in this continuation, bishop takes g2, so the bishop goes back, king e2, bishop d6, simply looking at winning h2, and now we have e4, bishop takes c4, check, knight takes c4. So h2 is being offered here, though. Don't think it quite works out because of rook h1. Black will be losing material, losing a piece there. So black plays king e7, and now we have h4, and this is almost an equal position. So this is a bit of a shame actually, in a way. It seems, you know, black should play bishop c7. That guards looks to guard a5, but in the game we see g6, and actually white can increase advantage now with a clever move. And after this move, maybe black got a bit down about his position, and actually resigned after this next move. Can you guess what Kamsky played here? It doesn't seem as though it's too horrific, the position, but knight a5. So looking to grab either b7 or c6. If the b pawn moves, then we just grab c6 with check. So the point is, well, black resigned because if takes, then taking here, taking on here. This is nice for white. Very nice for white. If king f6, then we can win a piece and beat the exchange up. So that's no good. And if king f8, then here, this is not particularly nice for black after rook c1. Not trying to win the rook or anything, just rook c1. And this is unpleasant for black. Very, very, very unpleasant. So here, e5, and then we've got the potential of two rooks on the 7th, which, as we've seen in previous examples, is pretty good. But with the b pawn, this is just too good. This position, this kind of position. If black ever takes here, then actually rook takes e6 first, even. So black actually thought his position was bad enough to resign after knight a5. Maybe it's slightly premature, but a clever move. In fact, knight a5. I mean, bishop takes b8 before it was also quite clever. Okay, so let's look at another example. Richard Report is playing white. Richard Report is 2704 and his opponent is 2390, and actually black in this position has already a really fantastic resource in this endgame. White seems to be implying that, you know, bishop g5 is a dangerous threat to parry, but actually maybe Julian Armando should put Boris Spassky's hat on and try and ignore the opponent's threat if you think you've got fundamental trump cards. And actually here, there's a lot of passed pawns which seem quite dangerous, and actually in this position, h3 is already very dangerous. But in this particular moment, black played king f7, maybe wary of bishop g5. And white should actually put the brakes on h3. White is a 2704 and should maybe sense the danger here that black can't be allowed h3. And we'll see why. King f4 was played. And in this position, from an engine perspective, this is totally, completely lost for white after h3. This is like nearly +3, this position. So you might wonder why. Let me show you. So g takes. If the king ventures here, then knight d5, and we're going to have e3. So there's no time for this. The other point, though, which is now expressed by the game, is g3. And here, king e7 was played. Not worrying about any pin anymore. King e5. Is the pin a problem? No. Knight h5. Threatening now, knight takes g3 with this pawn. That's the point about h3. It's so powerful here. So white is actually lost in this position, totally. If he tries to check, say like this, knight takes. Black's actually got knight f1 next, hitting h2. So like this, and we've actually got now g3 next to try and queen the pawn. So this is just totally lost for white. So knight h5 check was tried, king d6, knight takes g3, king takes, knight takes f5, and white is, with these two on, white resigns. Yeah, a 2700 was taken down. Major upset here, just as bad as the Ivanchuk upset shown earlier in an early example. So Richard Report losing to a 2390 Juan Armando. So well done, Juan Armando, taking down your very high rated opponent. So this next example is a kind of backfire. I find it quite interesting that a simple move can backfire, But black to play here, Zoltan Amazia 2690, playing Khalil Benkarabi, and like the Kramnik game, black's position is potentially paralysed after just one wrong move in the opening, and this one wrong move is played, knight bd7. Black should consider here knight a6. So can you guess why this is such a big problem? It leads to white with a very significant advantage here. What would you play in this position as white? Okay, Queen a4. It's very, very uncomfortable pressure here. Indeed, you know, both on d7 and on d5. So white is also threatening knight c6 as well, among other things, as well as knight takes and knight takes d5. Black tries just rewinding with knight b8. It's incredibly unpleasant now. Rook d1, h6, bishop f4, and the game actually didn't last that long now. Rook e8, rook ac1, a6, at least trying to stop knight b5, but now queen b3. Look at the pressure here. And if something like c6 in this position, then white can blast the center with e4. It's just very, very uncomfortable. Black tries knight c6, and he's just giving up the pawn. Maybe the engine does suggest c6 or b5 or g5 or rook f8, but not what was played. This accelerates to the end, knight c6, quite quickly after knight takes d5. It's pretty horrible. There's no little trick here like knight a5 because of the check. Knight takes f6, and actually we're on f7. So it's a total disaster. Knight takes, bishop takes, and it's just here resignable. After bishop takes b7, black actually resigned. He's losing material. So yeah, it just shows one casual move in the opening here really backfires. It's paralysed position. It's just horrible, this position here. You know, if knight takes e5 had been played, then like this, just losing a centre pawn, for example. So queen a4, yeah. Let's look at another interesting example. Talking about major backfires now, but the opponent in this game, Al-Shuba Basil 2135, is playing one of the top rated players of the tournament, Alexander Gristruk, on the Russian team. And after knight takes d4, perhaps white's best is, it's already a very bad position, is queen d3. Black could actually just double the pawns and play e5. So it's already gone very badly wrong in the opening. But white plays bishop takes f7, trying to at least gamble favourably if he can win back the piece after queen c4 check. So if the king did move back, then white would be just fine. But pardon me, this backfires here spectacularly. Can you guess what Alexander Gristruk played? So he's inviting what seems to be initially a little bit on the scary side, but you know, if king 8, there's no problem for white. That, you know, that has solved the problem. If king 8, queen takes d4. So Gristruk to play. Okay, if I give you a few seconds, starting from now. Okay, he plays knight e6, so it seems to invite knight g5 check. There's a big snag here after king e8, which is revealed. Knight takes e6. Black doesn't move the queen, although even moving the queen to c8 is actually a very strong idea in this position, because the c1 bishop. So this position, it keeps two things attacked, the c1 bishop and e6, and this is winning for black as well. But also rook c8 is very strong with the same sort of ideas, that two pieces are kept being attacked, c1 and e6. This is the point. So white's actually losing material here by force. I don't think the check does much, just queen d7, and again we've got two pieces always attacked. But this is what was played, the check. Queen takes, Now not king takes, because then knight takes f8 gets white out of trouble because it's check. You can do something about this. Black here just takes with the knight, leaving the knight and the bishop attacked. And this is just lost. White has to lose material. So plays knight takes g7, knight d2, and now black is just a piece up. White resigned. To be fair to White, he gave it a punt against the Christian, but was out-tacticked, basically. This kind of allowing this seemingly aggressive check. But yeah, the queen and the bishop are unfortunately skewable tactically, and that's kind of fully taken advantage of with this rook c8. So leaving White in very, very serious trouble. So an interesting backfire there from White, but you know, White was much lower rated, 2-1-3-5. He tried his luck in the opening, and sometimes that just happens. Just makes things a little bit worse, playing a dodgy opening sequence. Let's go on to our next example. Now, Carlos Armando Juarez Flores, 2-4-2-5 playing White, actually has almost a decent position against Ding Liren, one of the top Chinese players, 2-7-4-2. Here, you know, it's only meant to be a small advantage for Black, technically, from an engine perspective. Black plays h6, but White now should do something about king safety, because this knight and the light squares are not a very nice combination with the queen here on this diagonal. A move suggested is h4 by the engine. So say knight d2. White can try now, apparently rook c3. This looks still dangerous, but knight check we can actually take here, so that would defend against that. This almost is bordering on inequality. Say e5. This can almost be taken with f3 now, and apparently this is okay. It requires some very, very delicate defensive ideas, like h4, it seems. Just waiting. But you see that rook c3 resource, being able to do that is important, and this, unfortunately, this totally backfires this c4, because it stops rook c3 to be able to cover f3. And now we get knight d2, and this is a horrible check, not, you know, because the knight can come back, and it's very, very dangerous for the queen and knight. Then the queen, you know, potentially coming down on h1. So this is a disaster. This really has a backfire property, this after knight d2. And White makes things even worse now. Apparently, well, it's a really bad position. King g2, then knight takes c4 with that pin. But apparently this is the best move, and that shows how bad the position is. If king g2 is now the best move, I guess h4 would be given king h2 as a resource. But yeah, c5, and now, from what was just a few moments ago an equal position, is a total disaster position. After check, White actually resigned, because now king f1, knight d4, and if the rook moves, well, we have queen h1, checkmate, everything covered. So it's a total disaster. You see that this natural looking c4, c5, the passed pawn motive is in total conflict with White's king safety, which needs to be a motive at all times as well. So total disaster there, but it's a tricky position anyway. But apparently, you know, h4, you know, knight d2, you know, we've got moves like rook c3. Probably not king h2. This is probably dangerous as well after check, and knight d4. This is still mega dangerous. So White has to be able to preserve rook c3. We've still got very, very dangerous stuff going on. If rook c3 here, then actually, even instead of the check, knight b5 is forking absolutely everything as well. Okay, so sometimes a little bit of panic on the lower rated players happens, and they've actually got technically quite decent positions. These first two rounds, you know, some mismatched teams clearly, but now here Stanley Chumfwa, a 2-3-1-7 is against Etin Bakro, 27-20. And yes, things have gone slightly wrong. And in fact, you know, how bad can it get from here? Well, white plays Queen G4, which apparently is one of the better tries from an engine perspective anyway, to give up C2 to try and get G7. So, for example, this might be almost okay for white, but it's still better for black. But another optimistic thing, which unfortunately might never happen against such a strong player, except in dreams, is castling and bishop h6 to win the exchange, and then obviously white would be better. But black makes the whole Queen G4 black backfire quite spectacularly. Can you guess what black plays in this position? If I give you 10 seconds to pause the video. So back row to play with black. I'll flip the board for you. So you're black, back row, 27-20. What would you play here? Okay, G5. If bishop takes G5, then we just, I think, just use the pin, and we can just munch the piece quite safely. So after G5, white's actually in big trouble. The game continued C3, H5, Queen E2, Queen C6 now threatening mate, Queen F1, H4, and this is really quite brutal. After C takes B4, black doesn't care about recapturing a pawn. Just plays H3, undermining white's king safety. B5. Now Queen C2 is played. So this is a big threat. There's pressure on all these pieces. Pressure on the knight to win the knight here, if nothing else. Knight A3 is played. Bishop takes A3. Now H takes G2. And this is completely busted for white. If he plays Queen E2, can you guess what black plays in this position? There's another point of this Queen C2 move. This didn't happen. White actually resigned here. So Queen E2. Yep. Queen H7. Look at that. No defense really. It's desperate defenses. So white resigned there. Bit of a crush from that initial position. You might think, how could it go down so quickly for white? Now in this next example, Sebar Ali, a 2-3-8-7, is playing against David Navarra, and let's keep with the black perspective for a moment. So white's just played Rook takes C5. So does black want to handle this apparent threat of bishop takes C6 with, you know, say a move like Rook D6? That is actually still, this is a decent position for black. This position here, actually, it's still an advantage, but black plays even more powerfully here. David Navarra plays an even more powerful move, showing his own fundamental trump cards rather than the opponent's threats, handling the opponent's threats. Can you guess what black played here if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, David Navarra to play, plays knight E5, giving up the bishop. He wants to get this knight G4 in. Bishop takes. Now already knight G4 is still quite dangerous even in this position. Even in this position, this is still okay for black. G3, there's queen takes F2. And it's interesting stuff. You know, like the D pawn is very, very dangerous. But no, even stronger. Just check. Now knight G4, threatening mate. Rook E1 takes, check, and now D3, threatening a mate in 2 now with the check and the check there, because the king's escape is ruled out. Bishop E5 is played. We have check, and now D2 absolutely crushing move here. White resigned. If rook e2, then we just take that. We're queening the pawn. It's hopeless. It's mate in one next move. If rook f1, then queen takes c5. Now the bishop's hanging. There's a threat of knight f2, of knight e3. Pretty bad stuff. So say bishop g3. Knight e3 is pretty simple and strong. So yeah, it's very, very powerful, resourceful stuff from the higher rated players, just ignoring threats here. Knight e5, just using their own fundamental trump cards. Now the last example, let's show you from rounds 1 and 2, another major player with black, German #1 Arkady Neidesh. His opponent with white is Espen Lee 2435, and technically white, who's just snagged the pawn on a7, after knight e4, technically white should be nearly okay with queen e3 to get the queens off. Simple idea, get the queens off if you've got some king safety issues. Here though, black would still be better with this continuation, it seems. Rook f8, rook d8, and black is looking forward to playing like this, I think. So it's not so rosy for white, this ending. So white actually maybe tried to avoid that sort of thing and played bishop e5. But now f4, and actually black's advantage has grown significantly, threatening all sorts of nasty things, like taking in knight z3 possibilities, or on f2. So for example, if, well, g4, we just take that. Okay, so white's stuck for a move. He plays actually queen d4, and now rook f5, threatening just to take here and deflect the queen away from f2. Is pretty nasty. Rook f1, trying to defend f2. F takes. Now if hg here, black can just play this and aim for this sort of thing at leisure. It's very, very dangerous. Bishop takes g3 was played, and now we have this knight c3 threatening knight e2. Pretty nasty stuff. Rook e1, knight e2, winning the exchange, and black soon wins after this. The game continued like this. Check, check, protecting d7, and after this, actually, this is quite a nifty move. White resigned. If we go back, why is so bishop e5, f4? This is just what moves can white play here? If rook e1, f takes. If bishop takes, knight d2 threatens queen c6, and that very nasty queen and knight combination on the light squares, which kind of echoed in the previous example. So this is all pretty nasty stuff here. After knight d2, queen c7 doesn't really help. Queen f5 or queen d3. These are all very, very strong possibilities. But yeah, I think the point of showing this is that white actually technically maybe a little bit of panic, or maybe it's just an endgame visualization not to have this endgame. But it seems almost, from an engine point of view, almost it was like transforming from an equal position to a totally lost one. So that's why I thought it was a sort of backfire to show you. Anyway, I hope you got some interesting insights from this. It's a bit of an experimental format for covering an Olympiad like this. I've not really done it before, but hopefully some of it was interesting. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.